willkommen, bienvenue to Cycling, Radsport und Cyclisme. Today it's our first interview that we're bringing you, and I guess I'm really just super happy to have. Um, you'll hear me give a proper intro to him later on, actually in the podcast or interview, but it is Adam Hansen. He's a really great guy. He's super easy to chat to. We talk so much about his racing career and how precise and meticulous he was, and all the planning that went into everything he did. Um, I hope you like it, and just sit back, listen, and enjoy.
Today I am joined by a man who I've wanted to chat to for a long time. Um, if you've been following cycling through the early noughties and into 2010s, you'll know he's done so many Grand Tours. It's just 20 in a row, which I believe is a record, spanning from the 2011 Vuelta a España to the 2018 Giro d'Italia. Getting through all of them without DNFing is quite an achievement in itself. Just getting through one. And since then, he's even gone on to work in cycling governance, which we'll touch upon as well. It's my pleasure to say I'm joined today by Adam Hansen. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, I thought let's start with a bit about your cycling career and just how does someone go from racing in Australia to, I guess, racing in Austria, which, in a dictionary is not a far distance. In geography is a huge distance.
Yeah, so originally I was living in Australia and I wanted to be a good triathlete, and I was a good runner and swimmer, and I had a contact of a team here, well, in Austria, just south of where I'm living now, and I thought I'd give it a try for 1 year just to do some road racing in Europe to see if I can improve my cycling for my triathlons. And I actually just love cycling. I love road racing, and it was just so much easier in the sense where you sign up to a team and they take you to the races, they give you the equipment, and it's just more. Yeah, you race more often than in triathlons. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, wow. And was it like, did you find it easy to get used to the tactics? Because I assume triathlon, it's like no drafting or limited drafting, if any, depending on the style of triathlon, and road racing's all about energy conservation and drafting.
Oh, for sure. I did not finish my first year in Austria. I did not I finished my last race I did is the only one I finished. I
Wow.
got spat out. I didn't understand the racing, and it was also a lot longer races than I was used to. I was quite young, and I couldn't survive the distance of the races. So yeah, I learned the hard way, but I was determined to go back to Australia back then, and then train through the off season. So it was the summer in Australia, which was to my advantage, and come back and have another go.
Oh, wow. And then a couple of years in Austria, and then you ended up on the T-Mobile team, which, 2006, that's a huge team at the time. Certainly, I've I'm a massive Cav fan, and I remember reading his autobiography, and he's like, "Yeah, I wanted to learn German at school because then I could get into T-Mobile." And like, was that an easy jump to make to go from an Austrian continental team to T-Mobile?
Yeah, I was actually I was super lucky with my making it to professional. Because what happened was I had I was working with a guy that knew someone in T-Mobile, and I was putting a lot of pressure on him to try and get me to go into a bigger team. And T-Mobile was never going to take me. But they said for my it was the guy helping me. They sort of said, okay, he can come and he can do one performance test, and we'll do that, and that'll make him happy, and then he can go back. And they tested three riders. There was an Austrian, Bernard Cole, Bas Gilling, and then myself. And the three of us rocked up, and then they said, okay, we're going to take the two strongest guys. And I did my research on the performance test they did. So it was 25 watts every 3 minutes, which is a very long FTP test, lactate test. So normally it's like it's not every because sometimes it's 2 minutes or a minute, and the whole test is 16 minutes long. Where this was like a 45-minute test. It was more accurate because there was bigger spaces between intervals. So I really specifically trained for this, and I did the best results. And then the doctor tested me and said, "Congratulations, you're on the team." I went back to Austria thinking I was on the team, but then I got a phone call and I was never ever going to be on the team because they needed an Austrian rider because the T-Mobile was in Austria and there was no T-Mobile in Australia, and they needed a Dutch rider because there was T-Mobile in Dutch. So, and the doctor was very embarrassed because he said that I was on the team, but he wanted to follow my training and see how I got the results. So he kept an eye on me, and then it wasn't until 2 years later when they almost cleared the whole team and I was starting again. I was lucky to have the opportunity to have a go for 1 year.
Wow. And then, yeah, obviously that morphed into High Road, which then became Columbia, and then HTC High Road, was that afterwards?
Yeah.
And obviously you did the 2008 Tour de France, which was my entry point into the sport. So
Nice.
I remember watching sort of you, I presume you would have done some of the setup work.
Yep.
You know, Gerald Shearlek was a key lead-out rider.
Yeah.
Cav being like my idol, you know, it's incredible to see that. And then you stayed with them for a while and then moved on to Lotto. And I guess what I'm curious about is like some riders will be like bouncing around teams 1 year after the next, whereas you've stayed pretty solid, you know, two massive teams, and you just went, yep, stay with them for a bit, go to Lotto, stay with them for another bit. So how do you, I guess, cope with, because I assume teams constantly change and the cultures always change, so how do you keep kind of, I mean, staying on the good side, I guess, or like just, you know, not moving basically?
Yeah, well, I think I came from a different mindset and upbringing. To me, I was a programmer before, so I was used to working in companies. And to me, it was always your behavior in teams or in companies. So, yeah, and it was never a good sign when you see a rider jumping from teams because that means the team's not happy with them. And I notice a lot of teams they do want well-behaved riders. They don't want riders that have problems. They don't want riders that have too much influence because that can be bad also. So for me, I was actually happy that I only was on two teams and I changed because of my choice. And it really showed that the teams were happy with me. I did what I was told in terms of the work that I had to do. And yeah, it was to me that's one thing I was super happy with in that sense.
Yeah, and if I may ask, like, why did you choose to change at that point in your career?
So yeah, so I actually uh, so what happened was is I was racing for T-Mobile and I went to my first year and I went to California and we did this one stage where Cab was going to be dropped in this climb and I said to Cab, "I'll stay with you." And then the instructions were, "Don't stay with Cab." And I stayed with Cab, but we were dropped, and it was just Cab and I was really fighting to bring him back for the sprint. And we had who was with me? I think it was some CSC rider. I don't know if it was Jens Voigt or Bradley McGee, but he was sitting behind Cab's wheel, so it was me, Cab, and a CSC rider. Stuart O'Grady, that's right. And the closer we got, then because CSC was chasing on the front, and they had I forgot who they were sprinting for. It was a Argentina rider.
One Jose Haydo, probably.
One of these guys. And the closer we got, then they told Cancellara, and he would put a few gears harder and keep the distance away. But we didn't make it back, but I did a really good job, and Cav sort of learned a lot of trust from me. So this is really good early on in my career because Cav wanted me at every single race he did. And this really kick-started my career in that sense. So I was doing all the races with Cav. That's why I did the Tour de France in 2008, like my second year as professional. And I did all the races with Cav. And then what happened was I did this one race and I broke my collarbone. Bit of a long story. Tire came off around the corner. Broke my collarbone. And then I missed the Tour de France in 2009. And then I did the Velta for Andre. And the team saw that I was a real loyal rider, and I would do everything for the sprinter because I understood. Because when I was an amateur, I, 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 I was a leader, and I knew what would really help me if I had a good domestic, always protecting me and sheltering me and that. So I used it in reverse when I was helping the leaders, like Cav and Andre, and I actually really enjoy helping the leaders. So at the end of that season, I remember Rolf Aldag, he said to me, "Okay, Adam, I want you to continue racing with Andre." I was like, "Yeah, but what happened to Cav?" He goes, "The problem we have in the team is we put anyone with Cav and they work 100% for Cav. We give one of those riders Andre and they ride 80% for Andre. But you ride 100% for Andre or Cav or anyone. So it's better for the team that you go for Andre at 100% and then we put another rider with Cav." So I thought, okay, I'll stay with Andre. So I was on Andre's program, and Andre, we did the Giro, we did the Velta, we did not the Tour de France, not Milan San Remo, not the races that Cav wanted, that Andre wanted, but more like I don't want to say like the second tier races because they are very big races we did, but that's sort of what happened. And but Andre was winning more races than Cav, but Cav had a better quality of results. So then what happened was I remember we were in McDonald's one day after one stage in 4 days to Dunkirk or something, and it was Marcel Seberg, myself, Vicente Reines, Andre, and I think it was one other person I forgot. And I said to Andre, I said, "Why don't you just change teams?" He goes, "Oh, I cannot change teams. I need you guys." I said, "We would all go with you." I was like, "Yeah, we all go with you." And then we had this plan to all move ship and create like a team based around Andre. And Andre was the one in charge looking for the team, so he looked for a team. And Lotto was going to take us all, and then we all jumped ship, and it was that's those you had maybe 2 good years of Andre versus Cav at the tour, and and that's sort of how it went with Andre, and I stayed with Andre for the rest of my career.
Wow, that's incredible, and I guess that shows the sort of the loyalty of you, and like when I was looking up your results, is very much like it struck me that you were always riding in for others and for their benefit. Um, you know, how did you find that going from being a leader on an amateur team, as you said, to then riding as a kind of domestique and being loyal to others, and you know, I assume not getting that many chances for your own glory.
Yeah, well, I knew early on, especially at T-Mobile and HCC, I was never going to be a leader there. There was there were so many stars in that team. I knew my place very well, and what I saw helping Cav, my career really was real beneficial for my career to help them. Like I was doing all the big races at such a I don't want to say young age because I turned pro late, but at only 2 years being professional. So it was more beneficial that way, and I also had more security because whatever happened, Cav was fighting for me to have a contract. Andre was fighting for me to have a contract. So in this sense, um, it was I enjoyed it in that sense, but also, and I don't want to say this like a cop out, but there's a lot less pressure in that sense. I knew I could do my job really well. I knew I could climb better than Andre. I knew I could climb better than Cav, and there was never a difficulty in a race because I knew if I climbed with them at the top of a mountain or something, I would be fresher than them and I could do a really good job. And I had so much satisfaction to play a really key role and share the results with them. And we did the type of guys that we had, like Andre. We had such a great relationship, and we still do. And just to share the experience, all the success that we had, because with Andre, he was winning in his prime. He was winning every fourth race he entered. So we were winning every fourth race we entered. So that was a highlight. That's just a highlight of my career.
Yeah, and you mentioned about being kind of fresher than the riders you were helping. That's kind of how it works. And always in Grand Tours, we see that the sprinters have this battle against the time cut. And we've heard, like, I watch quite a bit of GCN. I mean, other platforms are available, but, GCN's the one I watch. And your compatriot, Robin McEwen, always talks about being able to kind of make that calculation of how fast to ride. Like, was that something you were in charge of, or is that something that was left to someone else? to kind of take charge on?
Well, the benefit of Andre was he was one of the better climbers out of the sprinters. He was probably like pure sprinters.
Yeah.
Like Michael Matthews was better climber, but Andre at his best would climb just as good as Michael Matthews. But when you're talking about um, Cavendish, Kittel, um, even Cipollini of those days, Andre was far better. So we never were in fear of making the time cut. So we didn't do much calculations. We only had a few issues in the Velta one year because um, what was happening was is the GC guys would let the brakes go to 20 minutes, and then we're already like out of time almost before even hitting the climbs. And then once we hit the last climbs, then the GC guys would sprint off, and they were no fear. But then we had to like hold that 20 minutes time gap. So it's only one Belter that we really had a problem. But yeah, with Andre, it was fairly easy to make the time cuts. We were no stress. We had like Marcel Seberg, he stressed quite a lot with the time cuts. But the team around Andre, like Vicente Reines also, Lars Bach also, we all climbed pretty good, so we didn't stress so much.
Oh, awesome. And I mean, we've started talking about Grand Tours already. I did mention it in the intro. Like, how did it feel to do 20 in a row, kind of unbroken, with, you know, zero issue?
Yeah, actually, how it started was I always wanted to do three in one year. So I did three in one year and I just enjoyed it. The team was happy with my performance. And then when I asked to do three the next year, they didn't believe I wanted to do it. I said, no, I really want to do it. So I did. Then it came to six in a row, and I really enjoyed being at home. And the good thing about doing these grand tours is I would have a month off at home. I would do a grand tour, a month off at home, do another grand tour, a month off at home. And I had a lot of periods of times at home because I only did 9 races a year, which meant I only had 9 travel days a year. Where if you're doing like 50 races a year, you have 50 travel days a year. And sometimes it's two travel days also after the race. So I was at actually a lot more time at home. And then it's sort of like I just kept wanting to do it. And then it came to nine. I did nine in a row. And then someone said, oh, the record's 12. And I was like, oh, I'll never get to 12. It's impossible. Um, and then I sort of got to towards 12, and then the record jumped from I think 12 to um, I think 13 because it was a there was a change in the like it was how was it? It was something like the record was I think it was 12, but 12 when the Delta was in April and it was only 2 weeks, and then or something like it changed. And then someone's like, actually, the record's 15. I was like, oh, I'll never make it. And I remember I got to 15. I was like, I'm really going to do it because I just thought I had to crash out. I had to get sick, or not make selection one year. But I was in that sense I was really lucky, and yeah, I got to 20, and in the end, it's a bit surreal actually when you look at the Grand Tours now and you see everyone just dropping off like flies. I
Yeah.
was in that sense.
Yeah. Did you, when you got to 20, were you just like, please don't pick me now? Like, I don't want to do 21. Like the 2018 Tour de France. Like, nah, just I'll stay at home, thanks.
Well, actually, the Tour was one of my least favorite races. Um,
Really?
Yeah, it's just so stressful in that sense. The Giro I love. The Giro is just is such a great race and so passionate. The fans are real. Like I always said, that the Giro fans are real cycling fans. And you go to the Tour, you have a lot of tourist fans. They're out to tour, but they're not really cycling fans. Like if you grab some fan on the side of the road, the Giro, they know everyone. Well, if you grab, every second person on the tour, they don't know the cyclist. They're just there because of the tour and the atmosphere, and that's all nice and wonderful. But to me, there was more passion in the Giro. So Giro was my favorite Grand Tour, and the Velta was like a holiday race. The weather was always good. It was late starts. You could sleep in, and the stages were relatively short back then. And you go to the tour, and there was just so much pressure from the sponsors, and you had to get results. And we got results every year. I think one year, our worst year, we got one win, and that was like someone died or something. It's not good to be at the tour when you don't have success.
Mm.
So yeah,
Gosh. And yeah, speaking of success, which is a lovely segue, so thank you. Obviously, you got, I say obviously, people maybe haven't done this research, but I know you got a stage win on a mountain stage in the Giro and in the Vuelta. Um, like, how do they rank amongst your victories? Is there a particular favourite you have?
Um, I prefer my Velta win overall because it was in the final of the race, and there was all John Degenkolb was there, Michael Matthews was there, Valverde was there, and I attacked on the last climb, and guys tried to come with me, and I did maybe three tacks in a row, and it was really like let's say from the selected group. And yeah, it was everything. Actually, everything went my way in that sense. Because there was another big climb before, and all the workers' domestics were dropped. So all the leaders had no workers there. So when I did get that gap, they couldn't they couldn't chase me down because they had no domestics to help all the sprinters. So to me, that was my favorite win, definitely Volta.
Yeah. So, what made you kind of decide enough was enough? Like, I've heard other riders in interviews be like, "Oh yeah, you just wake up one morning and you're just like, yeah, now, now is enough." Um, Obviously, we saw Cav this year announce his retirement. You know, maybe isn't. I was lucky enough to sit in on the press interview of Philippe Gilbert and his retirement one as well. And you always get a sense that you just know. But like, how was it for you? What kind of triggered it, or was there anything that triggered it even?
No, I wanted to do some triathlons. So I thought, while I'm still young, I sort of have a shot of triathlons, and so and then when COVID happened and everything, to me, I think I probably misjudged a little because we had the COVID year, and the COVID year was not the best for professional sports. Somehow cycling got through it, which is pretty amazing. So COVID never stopped any cycling races, any major cycling races. And then during that period, I thought, okay, I will stop cycling and I'll give triathlons a go because triathlon's an individual sport. So if this COVID was going to continue, I thought there was a greater chance that individual sports were happening. So I decided to do that. And then, so it wasn't not like I had enough. I still wanted to race and I still do some races just for fun. And then I started doing triathlons and then had a lot of free time doing triathlons, so I started picking up some different types of work that also which interests me, and then sort of triathlons took a back seat, and then I've got other things on my plate now.
Yeah, and we're gonna get onto those other things very shortly. Um, there's just something I wanted to touch on that I think I remember reading. I want to say around 2015. I kind of get this sense from you from other things as well, like. So obviously back in the day when you said about like the fact that you figured out what the test was going to be and therefore trained specifically for it, and it comes across quite meticulous in your planning. And likewise, I've read about that you've made your own shoes, which I find incredible because I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like, I guess draw an outline of your foot as maybe a starting point, but I don't really know. And obviously, you posted about how you're creating something um, involved in your rollers at CPA. The Is it Cyclist Professional Alliance? I want to say I'm bad at acronyms sometimes. So yeah, do you think that meticulous nature helped you in your sporting career and now in your kind of governance career?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, definitely in my sporting career. Like I remember when I was in Austria and they did a performance test on me, they said, you should. The guy said you should quit cycling and you should be a chef because he knew I could cook half good. And he said I'll never have a professional career in sport because my lab results were terrible. But then I sort of broke everything down, and to me it was like, okay, if I train like a professional, then I should be a professional. What most people have the idea is that you become professional, then you train like a professional. I was like, no, you got to train like one to be one. So I always, had this in my mind, and also even with like with my performance in races. So if I had to do a lead out in the end, I knew that I couldn't do better than a good rider next to me. But if I come to the finish with more glycogen in my system and he is depleting his glycogen, so I could train my fat metabolism better and I can train the amount of carbohydrates I can take in and spare some for the final. Me at 80% for my performance is better than him at 70% of his performance. Well, he's a much better rider than me. So a lot of my training in that sense, and also the way I race, was to be as conservative as possible. And I didn't have to be the best at the finish. I just had to be the one that had the more glycogen stores than the next person. So yeah, I definitely had all this. Yeah, in my training and my racing idea, and also like the shoes. So if you compare my shoes to the team's Lotto's Garner shoes, they were half a kilo lighter with both shoes put together. And that's rotational weight. So for me, it was like that's a huge advantage. When you're trying to make a multiple car faster, you do the crankshaft, the pistons, the rods. The first thing you do to increase power. So for me, it was reduce the rotational weight. And then after you do that, you do chain, then you do wheels, tires, and then you do the frame um, to improve the performance. So I was always like thinking like this. Um, yeah, so yeah, I guess so. That's the way I was trying to do everything at the optimal to be the best that I could be.
Wow, that's incredible. I never really even thought about it when you said like it's say 500 grams. I'm like, that's like a bottle of water basically. You know,
Well,
that's a big one. But then when you said it's rotational, that, I assume I'm not no physicist, but my base understanding of mechanics is that that will be a significant saver, especially because that's 500 grams saved every time you do a pedal revolution, which 120 revs a minute. That's quite significant.
yeah, it adds up. And the thing is also, if you can reduce this weight, this is not the weight of your bike. So your bike is still 6.8 kilos, and my bike was always 6.8 kilos. So if someone, they have, let's say you have the Garner shoes and they're half a kilo heavier there, but they save the weight on the bike, I still had the lightest bike you could have. So yeah, it's actually a big difference. Yeah. Mm.
Gosh. And then how did you get into governance? Was that always a thing you were looking at kind of when you were coming through as a professional, or was this something that you've gone, well, I've stopped now. What else can I do? How can I make a difference?
Um, I actually haven't told anyone this story. So what happened is so this actually goes back to your other question about how I plan everything and do everything. So I was making an altitude room. So I made an altitude room also, and this was to improve my cardiovascular system. And where I live here, my front door is on the other side of the building, and my bedroom is on the other side. And when I'm in there, I cannot hear the doorbell. And I got a letter one day that I missed doping control, right? And I was like, I looked and I was like, yeah, but I'm all like, because I was super strict to my whereabouts. And I checked and I was home, right? And I was like, how did I have missed this doping control? It's impossible. And then I went through the paper, and the controller said, but they say everything that they did. So the time that came, I was like, I was home at that time. They rang the doorbell, and I was like, okay, I didn't hear it. And it says call athlete, and he put no. He didn't call me. Now they don't have to call. They don't have to call, but there's an option to call, right? And I was a bit pissed off with this because sorry if I swear. I was a bit annoyed with this because in my head it was like, are you trying to catch the rider out, or are you trying to catch them actually doping? Because there's a big difference, you know what I mean? And I've heard other stories where, so for example, Greg Henderson once, I think it was Greg, where he was having dinner with his wife. He heard something at the door and he wasn't sure. And then he just opened the door to check, and he was living in a flat. And when he opened the door, someone was walking, and he said he lived in the corridor. So they were walking away from his door, and he asked him, well, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I was doping control for you." He goes, "Yeah, I'm here. Where are you going? If you want to test me, test me." And they just walked off. They knocked once, and then they just go off. And then he was like, and okay, he swears quite a lot. He's like, "Yeah, you come and you test me. You like don't just walk." That's a miscontrol. And for me, I was really, yeah, I thought, this is not right. So I was thinking, okay, how do I change this? And what actually happened was, is I went to a CPA meeting because I wanted to change this rule where um, I wanted the control that, okay, you do your best to go there without notifying the athlete. But if you're at their house and you see that they're home, you call them. Like, just it's so easy to call the athlete. And I wanted to make this as a rule change. So I went to the CPA to see how it worked and if we can, because they're meant to help the riders. And at the meeting, I just thought, oh, this is. I didn't understand the complex of cycling where, you know, when you have a normal union, the union protects the workers against employees. Where if we were to do that, we protect the CPA protects the riders against the teams, but the teams they're fighting against the organisers, and they've got the UCI and they're judging the rules, and the UCI doesn't have so much control because there's some race organisers, I shouldn't say, that's bigger than the UCI, and with all these different let's say stakeholders, it's a nightmare for the CPA or for anyone in that sense. That's in the cycling group. And what I saw at the meeting was like, okay, it's not going to be so easy to fix this. And then the doping controls is a totally different entity in that. So I actually never changed this rule, but that got me involved into the CPA, and I saw that they were trying to do quite a lot for the riders, but it was so difficult also because everywhere was just brick walls. And that's how I sort of came into the CPA, and they really enjoyed having a rider there because they didn't have so many young riders. That's the other bad thing I'd like to say with the CPA back in those days. It, you have riders like myself that get so angry with something and they come to the CPA and they want to make a change, but these riders are 34 years old, 35 years old, and they're at the end of their careers. And by the time you make that change, they retire. So the rider's willing to put the work in. It's not for them, it's for the younger versions coming up. And the young guys, they don't care, they just want to ride their bikes and they're happy to get, bikes, uniform and some money. And so it is a bit of a struggle in this sense. And I saw that and I participated. And then they actually asked me last year if I was thinking about running for president. And I, I thought about it and I said no. And because my life's really good actually, I didn't need this problem. I don't need these issues and stress, and I have other work commitments and things like that, and I enjoyed the little time I had. And then they asked me again, and I couldn't say no, so I ran for presidency, and then I got the gig, and now I have no life. So
Yeah, that's amazing how that's worked out for you. Like, yeah, I didn't really want it. Now I'm here. I guess, yeah, one of the questions I've got is like, what is that relationship between the CPA, the UCI, the AIGCP, which is another, I guess, representative board,
yeah,
and then there's RCS, there's ASO, is RCS, that's Italy, right? And then the Spanish one, which is kind of ASO as well. Is it Unipublic?
yeah.
Yeah. So how does that all work? How do those relationships work, or do they work even?
Um, yeah, well, yeah, it's hyper complicated because if you want to do anything, you're going to step on someone's toes. You're going to upset everyone. And I think, I think I've done well so far because um, uh, the, I think I had the mindset like, how do I say this nicely? Well, I didn't care. I don't have to, if I lost my job, I thought, okay, if I lose my job, then I lose my job, and then I worked out that I can't lose my job. No one can fire me. The riders can fire me, but the UCI can't fire me. The race organisers and the teams can't fire me. So um, I voiced, and there was a lot of critics with the CPA in the past where we do get some money from the UCI, and and I think a lot of writers had this idea, or press had this idea that the CPA did whatever the UCI said because the UCI funds the CPA a little, very little. This is taken totally out of context. If they stop funding us, it doesn't change a thing. But we're not
Okay.
we're not going to say no to free money. But I shouldn't say that. They might cut the funding next year. Um, so this is not a problem, and I've already shown that I have no problem going against the UCI, and I've also gone against the race organisers and the Giro, and also the Tour a bit, and um, so yeah, it's not easy. I think as much as people think it's not easy, it is actually a lot more not easy as people imagine, because you always upset someone, and even when you go against, like even when we had this thing with the Giro about the stages and that, um, a lot of their answers like, "Oh, you would never do this to an ASL race," It's like, well, that's not true. That's really not true. Um, and I'll do it too. I'll always support the riders. And if I'm supporting the riders and I upset someone, then you're not upsetting me, you're upsetting the riders, and that's not where that they would not be my target audience who I'm trying to make happy anyway.
Yeah, because that was actually going to be one of my next questions was about how do you stay impartial, but like I guess you are partial, but you're partial on the side of the riders, and that's where you're kind of who you're trying to protect and benefit. Um, and you said you're very happy to, not very happy to upset people, but it comes with the territory. It seems. Um, do you think, or was it an aim to be as visible during the Giro and latterly the CIC Tour Feminin Pyrénées?
Yeah.
I've probably got that name wrong, but like, did you go? I need to make a really strong statement and be quite visible, or like, yeah, I guess how did you approach things?
Well, at the start, so the CPA is built up a bunch of members, and the members are associations, and the associations help the riders of their countries. Um, and when I started, they were asking how I wanted to do things, and I said that we should do things more transparent and say everything we do, because everyone's a bit against the CPA as they don't do anything for the riders, and that is not so true. It was very hard for the CPA to do things in the past, but the things that they did do, no one knew about it because they weren't so vocal about it. And it was hard for the CPA because riders didn't want to take part, and a lot of people attacked the CPA. And I had the ideas that we should be more transparent. And they were really afraid of this. They said, no, no, we can't upset, it's because it's so easy to upset anyone. I was like, yeah, but and I tried. I was a bit vocal at the start, and it was it was hard at the Giro because I had a lot of people go against me in the sense of the weather, because it was like, yeah, but it's tradition, and they always did in the past and race these kind of stages. And I was like, well, yeah, but and there was I saw there was two groups of, let's say, fans. There was fans that were totally against what I was doing, and then there was this really nice article written about what I was doing. First, he sort of this Italian media outlet. They sort of attacked me a little in what I was doing, and I read their piece, and I said, yeah, but I'm no one's standing up for the riders. I will stand up for the riders, and you can hate me, and I'm doing it because no one will stand up for the riders. And then he actually wrote a really nice article about, like, why can't the riders have a union? Why can't the riders have a spokesperson? And so yeah, so I think it's interesting also because what people forget is cycling is more just about racing. It's about what happens behind the scenes, and the dramas and the transfers, and there's so much more to it. And I think I noticed the more I was being transparent and the more I was being vocal about it, people saw a different side of the sport, and I think that made it a little bit more exciting also. And we actually got good feedback from the riders because it's so hard to communicate to the riders because they're so busy, and riders are just always on social media. So this is also a very good way for me to say what I'm doing. They see what I'm doing, and also what I wanted to do is, like, I was doing these surveys and I wanted to publish the surveys, but everyone was like, but be careful with that. So no, because if I ask riders to do a survey and half of them don't do it because they think it's for nothing, and then I publish the results, and this makes a group of riders that didn't take part like, oh, my voice is being heard, so I should participate in these surveys, because if Adam's going to fix safety and do what he wants for the riders, me thinking it does nothing, and I see that he's being vocal about, and he's talking to the organisers, he's talking to UCI to make these changes. Yeah, I want to have my say. So it actually encourages the riders to actually take part, and I'm happy to speak on their behalf. And even if if there's fans out there or anyone out there that's not happy about it, it's not. Just remember, it's not me saying it. The riders are saying it, and I'm the only one. I won't say only one, but I was the first one to sort of stand there and yeah, I'll say what they want to be said, and I'm happy to do it and wear the benefits.
Yeah, and it's incredible to see the benefits. You know, as I alluded to, the French mountain stage race for women. That yeah, I've probably jumbled up all the bits of the words.
Oh,
But
Pyrenees, yeah, you're right, the Pyrenees tour.
yes, like, did you feel kind of almost proud in a way when you saw that the riders made a stand and actually had a strike on, was it the second or third stage, when they just went, no, we're not going to race for a bit, and then kind of they went piano into the climb. They didn't actually race until they hit the climb.
Oh, for sure. So, yeah, it is. If we take back a little with the Giro. So with the Giro, when we did the protest, this was a bit of a fight because I think the stage 10 was really bad, the weather,
Right.
and I was communicating to the organizer, and it was hell for the riders, and um, they said we can't do it the day before. They said we can't do anything the day before because you don't know the weather the next day. It's not sure, right? So it was okay. So the next day the weather was horrible, like was horrible. And then I was saying, okay, so I tried to do something and it was too late, right? Because you got to do something. We can't organise something now. It's got to be the day before. I was like, well, I can't do the weather and I can't do the morning race. So it's okay. And they said you got to do it before. I said, okay. So stage 13 looked horrible. It looked horrible. And they said we had to make a decision the day before. So I was okay. So I got all the riders and said, okay, we must make agreement. First, if it's more than 80%, you all agree you stick to the rule, whatever people vote for. So even if you vote not to race and everyone votes not to race, those 20% must stick with the 80%. Everyone agreed. Everyone agreed on that. So it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, the final result. What matters is everyone will stick to the decision because we can't have a situation where there's two teams on the start line and the rest aren't. We've got to have it collectively together. And yeah, we made a vote and we had to stick to it. And we and the problem what happened was is for RSC, and this is a bit their fault. It actually turned out to be good weather in the morning, right? So it could have went on how they wanted, but they forced us to do it the day before because we couldn't do it the morning of the race. And so we made a stance and it was all decided the night before and was done. And and then it was they were and okay, it was very late at the night when we finalised everything. Um, but yeah, so they were a bit upset at that, but we stood our ground, and the most important thing is we stayed united, and this really showed the power of the riders. And then when you fast forward to Pyrenees Tour, same thing happened. It was just really not good enough. And when this happened, we had a new, I'm going to call it committee started called SAFER. I'm not sure if you're aware of this new committee that's getting started. And so I'm a bit involved in this also. Well, I'm heavily involved in this. And so I was communicating everyone in the SAFER group, and including the SAFER group is you've got the UCI, the teams, the organizer, and the riders. And I was sort of, I was saying this is just not good enough. What the women, and it doesn't matter if it's a women race, it's all the same. And we have to have the same rules everywhere. And then, yeah, so talking to the organizer, and they ensured everything was exactly the same. They improved everything. It was a few little mistakes, and I was like, phew, it was like horrible, like to the women. And then, yeah, so the second stage went on, and I watched it, and they were assured that it's better, and I watched it again from 1 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the morning, and I was like, because they were saying, because like what would happen is a car would the jury and the police would go, they would stop a car, so the car would stop, and the jury and the police would drive past. And if you're a person in the car, you're like, why did they stop us? Oh, okay, no one's stopping us, so we can just continue. Then they'd continue, and then the bunch would come, and then they'd get off the road. So they did not see these cars going into the bunch, and they thought they were stopping the cars. So I had to go through the whole race and find all the points where the cars came back on the road that you saw on the TV, and I was showing them, and then we did the stance, and then it finally worked. And this was also really good because people are starting to see that the riders that they want a certain level of safety, and that's it's riders want to race, but they just want it to be safe. And if it's safe, they're happy to race. They don't want races shortened or because also these riders are training months for these races, and they know the program before, and they train for that. They don't want to change the day before. They only change it if it's it's not if it's bad for the health or it's not safe. So it's been really good in this sense where we've shown that when the riders are united, yeah, we have some power.
Yeah, and it's really incredible to see. You know, that is the power of unity. Without getting all sort of preachy about it, collective action really makes a difference, and it's really great to see. Um, I'd like to touch upon like what we saw at the Tour de France Femme, um, where there's a couple of times where motorbikes potentially got in the way and made it more tricky, especially like even on the time trial for Marlon Reusser. I remember I spotted it. I was like, oh, that's a bit, and I know she wasn't happy. Like, I know you are doing some interesting work regarding motorbikes as well. So I guess like, how did you see it, and are you actually like watching every race you can, or cause that, like there's so many races a day, it's almost impossible. But
Yeah, I've been lucky in the sense where you help one race, and then I have these people on Twitter that like to send me videos of everything. So actually, I do watch some of the races, but I don't have to because there's so much online. If something's bad, people tag me and I look at like the Pyrenees Tour. I wasn't watching that race, and then as soon as I saw this one part that was not good, then I investigated a little into a bit more into it, and then I started watching this race to make sure it's up to standards. It's like Tour of Poland today. I think it was like at 3 o'clock. Someone sent me two cars crashing into each other. Because there was one rider that had some mechanical and the car stopped, and I think
yeah,
the car crashed in the back, and the doctor car crashed in the back. And straight away, someone tagged me, and the CPA found out. Like I saw it, and I spoke to the Safeguard group about it because this is some things we're trying to fix. So in this incident here, just by looking at it, sports directors are very good, and sports directors are trained. Sports directors do make problems also, but when you look at a Victoria car that crashed into the back of the team's car, you have to question: is this driver done the same safety course as a sports director? Because sports directors have to do the UCI safety course to be in the convoy, and I'm not so sure the spares vehicles have to do that, and I'm almost 100% sure the doctor cars don't do that. So they're probably just not used to this style of, because it's like being in a race car, car race, in the convoy. It's pretty dangerous. So I get tagged in these things, and then I can address them very quickly. So I don't have to watch all the races.
that's good because I was like, I know from like writing about things, I'm like, when it's the tour, that things like the Österreicher and Fahrt do not get really a look in.
Mm.
And I assume, yeah, that's similar for yourself. Like, there's only so much that you can give,
Mm.
and only so much time you have. Um, but yeah, what's the work that you are doing? Because I've seen bits of your engineering, but for the people listening, watching at home, and just in general, what are you working on currently?
So at the moment, I'm working on a laser system for the motorbikes. And as when I was racing, I knew the advantage you'd have sitting on a motorbike when it's 10 meters away, 15 meters away, and it did play a role into the racing. So sometimes the breakaways, like, do you remember the stage in the Belter? I don't remember the year where the whole peloton was like 30 minutes out of time gap time. And what happened was it was crazy day. So there was these two breakaways that went, and Sky was second on GC, and they were on the main bunch. And I think it was Nibali was in the first group, and Contador was in the second group. And there was like 8 guys and 12 guys, for example. And so Sky took control. They took control of the peloton, and they were riding full gas, like full gas. And then this time split was like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 9 minutes. And Sky was really like, he had the guys like Knees, like Luke Roll, like super strong guys on the flat. Like you just cannot ride away from these guys. And the whole Sky team riding. And it went to like 17 minutes, and then it was like 22 minutes, and then 24 minutes. And the time gap on that day, I think, was 30 minutes. And the stage was, I think it was 90 kilometers long. And the first mountain started at, I think it started at 45, 50 kilometers. And we were almost 3 minutes out of time before starting the mountain. Like on the flat, we're almost out of time. And Sky just stopped, right? Sky was like, and all the, all the teams like, if Sky can't close it, we can't close it. And so everyone just stopped and it was panic. And then when it's like 27, like it was like 27, 30, 35 minutes. And there was maybe, I think there was 7 teams not represented also. And we just all gave up because it was like, we knew the 2 breakaways were on the motorbikes. What we heard afterwards, the first breakaway was on a motorbike and the second breakaway was chasing on the motorbike. So they were flying and we had no motorbike. And we had the strongest team that couldn't close these 2 little breakaways in front. So they do play a huge part into the racing. And when I was at the tour this year, and I know, we were thinking about this, and also motorbikes are dangerous. When I was at the tour this year, there was some talks that there was one team that was saying, I got my guys on the front and I told them to close it was one of the last stages with the highest average speed. And he said, I told my guys to close the gap, close it now. And they couldn't close these 3 guys in front. And he was screaming in the radio to close them. And he was like, close it now, go away, do it now. And there was 2 or 3 teams working. They couldn't close it. He goes, these motorbikes, they influence the races too much. Like, this is way unfair. He goes, for us, if we were to win, it's like 1.5 million euro it's worth. It's actually worth a lot of money for the teams. And this wasn't a rich team. And some teams can survive. These small teams, it's actually very important. And also these small teams, this is I think a lot of people forget this. GC riders are very expensive. Sprinters are far cheaper than GC riders, far cheaper. And if you build your team around sprinters, it's far more affordable for a low budget team to build a team around sprinters. Because the sprinter is expensive, but the lead out guy is medium price, and the third lead out guy and the others, they're pretty cheap. And you can build a good team on a low budget if you have a super good sprinter. Where a GC team, they have 3 or 4 climbers that are more expensive than the sprinter. And so these sprinters, they really need their results to get the team. Where the GC guys are always on TV and it's totally different. And just, listening to this team and the riders struggling and things like this, I thought, okay, it's not so hard to make a laser system. So I was like, okay, then we have to address it. And then I ordered a laser a distance detection system which works at 40 meters, and I started playing around with it last week, and I got it working, and also I can detect 2 different distances with just with a simple. I used to do programming years ago, so I made this, and then I 3D printed how it's going to sit on the back of the bike, and you can adjust the angle so it can sit on different motorbikes depending on the seats, and it'll be pointed directly at the rider. And then I've got this, which I haven't hooked up, a LED. And what I'm going to have is all green when it's all good. And then when the cyclist is too close to the motorbike, it'll start going red. And then once it flashes red, totally, that's more than 3 seconds. He's been sitting in the draft. And also, I want to have a display put on. So this is a display I've got here where it shows the distance. So the rider can see, if he's too close and he doesn't need to look back, the motorbike rider. Because what I want is on his bars, he has the distance for the motorbike of the rider, and with the green and red light. So if it's red, he looks and he just goes 5 meters in front or something to get the distance. So it's easy for him, and I think it should be visible. That's why I got this on him. Because I think if only he sees it, he's not going to care. But if everyone sees, then I think it's, and I think he will keep the distance. So I should, if I have the time, I wanted to finish it today, but I should be able to finish it next week and test it. So in theory, it works. it works by testing my hand and everything. I just got to make sure that I've got to see. This is I've got it stuck to a board at the moment, so this is the laser system. Um, I I don't know how deep I'm going to have to put it in a tube because if it's too wide, maybe it detects too much.
Yeah, it just picks up trees as you go past. Like,
So yeah, so I might have to test different tubes how far back it sits to make sure it's got to it's got to work good, and then I'll test it probably next this because tomorrow I'm going to Glasgow for the Worlds, and then when I get back on Sunday I will I'll test it maybe Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
wow.
This so to make it fair racing, and then also, but I don't know if this will be used for the safety side. This is more for just making it fair and so they don't interfere in that.
Yeah, but then potentially with the safety, because we saw in the tour, like I want to say stage 18 maybe, where um, Felix Gal won the stage, and Vingegaard attacked, but then got stuck behind the motorbike that kind of
Yeah,
potentially it could, limit those sorts of occasions happening as well.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't. I've got to speak to Michael Rogers more. So he works at the UCI and he's in the department. More about how we manage the distance of the laser. So my idea at the moment is, and I've got to talk to him to make sure because it's up to them. They go govern the rules. But my idea is okay if the motorbike rider is traveling, let's say 50 kilometers an hour, then the distance would be 35 meters. And then when they go to the mountain, if they're riding 10k an hour, then 10 meters in front is fine because there'll be no draft. And there's a one guy, I don't know his name, I should. He's done all different tests of different speeds and their draft influence. So the rider can be closer if if the speed is slower. So it's always going to be no draft because the motorbikes have to be close to the rider for the safety of the riders in a crowd. When we saw the incidents, what happened in the Tour de France, there's crowds everywhere, the people everywhere. Um, first we were talking about it also in this safeguard committee. It was like, okay, first maybe we should put a car in front because a car would keep it wider, the fans. Then I was thinking, okay, but if you have a car in front, they can't travel as fast as a motorbike going in front because people are in the way. So maybe that's because a car would have to be maybe 1 or 2 minutes in front, for example, because the fans could really stop the cars, and that's worse. So if the car is too far in front, then the fans just sort of come, they sort of warp in behind and block the road. But the motorbikes, they can be close enough to the riders to create that safety section, but they get too close and the riders can't get around them. So this is why I think it's going to be a bit more complicated. And we just have to test it to make sure it's still fair and safe for the riders on these crazy stages in the tour.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I know race safety was one of your key priorities. I reread the sort of press statement when you got elected, and that was certainly something you highlighted. Like, what's next? I mean, I don't think things like rider safety will ever be fully cracked. Like there'll always be risk. That's just part of the sport. But what's kind of the second priority once you've done that, or what's next for you?
So it's the conditions I want better for the riders in the sense of insurances. That's one thing. So I've been negotiating with the teams to improve the insurances. There are some not good situations for the riders. So some riders have not been properly insured when they're in China or America or in Canada. So these have to be fixed. Um, Also, the minimum wage has to be increased because this hasn't been increased since 2018 and with inflation and everything. So we've been speaking with the teams and it should be finalized in the next week, the outcome of this. So I can't say anything now because it's not 100% agreed on. It should be, these two conditions should be better. And this is the joint agreement, so the contract between the teams and the riders. And that's so basically I negotiate the joint agreement with the teams and make it best as possible. And this is not so easy because I have one stance because I know what the riders all want and need, and the teams, the insurances can be. I don't think it's so expensive, but they think it's so expensive, the insurance for the riders. So some of the teams don't like paying so much for the insurance. So this is the definitely second priority.
That's really interesting. And one last thing I wanted to ask about is kind of is it a slightly tricky one perhaps, but regarding like riders and injuries, we saw. I think I'm going back to 2009 tour. I want to say, but
Mhm.
like legendarily, George Hincapie broke two ribs, and you know that was on stage 19 and still finished the tour doing a lead out on the Champs Elysees. Like, and I've always worried about like if a rider crashes and gets injured, like should they continue? But how do you properly assess someone in a race that's so governed by time? Because concussion tests take proper time to do, and if you're a GC rider and you know you have a crash and you hit your head, are you going to just happily sit there for 5 minutes whilst the doctor checks you out, going, well, that's my Tour de France riding away from me. I'm counting fingers on a bloke's hand.
Yeah. Well, I had one idea is we can put accelerometer sensor in the helmet, and basically you'd be able to measure how fast it stops on impact. And this is very easy to do, very easy to do. But you'd have to speak to someone who knows what that limit is. So the accelerometers are always measuring, and when they come to complete stop, you have a peak, and depends on the axis it comes to complete stop in. So to write the code of that would be very easy. But to know exactly to test of what level concussion is, um, and then on the other side of, so this would be actually easy to do and easy to implement. And then you would just have, okay, you decelerated at a certain amount, and that will cause a concussion, so you're just out of the race. That would be probably the best way to go about it. The only bad thing is, like doping controls, is you can never have a false positive. So let's say you're riding with, like if I'm riding with Rowan Dennis and he says something smart ass and I hit him on the back of the helmet, it fires it off and it's like, well, you're out of the race now. So you can't have something like that happen. And I don't know if teams would, how do I say this, before this, if let's say you're Tour de France and stage 20 and you hit your head and you can finish. I don't know. I don't know. I know that's not the right thing to do, but um, maybe the rider wants to finish. If you do pull him out and you take away his Tour de France victory, I don't know how that'll sit. That's not my position to judge that. It's up to, but yeah, I think that's definitely a tricky one. In the terms of breaking bones and that, like I've broken sternums, collarbones, and finished stages. And the reason why is because, like at the smaller races, I have had hard hits, think I've broken a bone, just went directly out of the race and find out it's nothing. It's just, and in that sense, if you do that at the tour, then and it is nothing, and you just, pull out of the stage, that costs the team and also your career quite a lot. So I think that's always why we've just had it in our, let's say, genes that you always go to the finish and just check it at the finish. Now that's with bones. Concussions is a totally different topic,
Yeah.
obviously, and a bit more fragile topic too. Because concussions have a long, they have a, like we saw the CPA, we looked at some studies years ago about the long-term side effects of concussions, and this is very scary. And because it leads to depression and brain trauma years down the track. Um, and a lot of people aren't aware of this. So yeah, the concussions are far more sensitive topic.
Hmm. Yeah, because I've always wondered, like, yeah, it's just whenever I've crashed in like little league races, like the first thing I do is get up, try and keep going. Like it's just even at that level of regional, you're just like, yeah, it's what you do as a bike racer is you get up, you keep going, and if you can't, that's it, like game over.
Mm,
And like these aren't the Tour de France,
mm,
if I'd won that race or not. Like, no one's going to remember it. No one's going to write about it.
Uh, uh,
But it's kind of like it is really drummed into you, and sometimes I'm like, is it worth it? But then equally, as you said, like, if you pull out the tour and it's nothing, then
yeah. Like if that happened, if you're in a team and you crashed and you said, it's my shoulder's sore, and you just didn't finish the stage, and the team would look bad on you. And I don't know if that's a good thing, but I'm not, but it's the biggest race in the calendar. And yeah, if you pull out and you're wrong, this goes back to, if it's good or not. Teams remember this and they know selection for the year after. When this rider has a little problem, he goes home, but this other rider, he fights through. That's what they want, and this is where we need to protect the riders more. But we just got to do it. That's also best for the riders.
yeah. So I guess, yeah. How are you feeling about the world? Just to sort of tie things off, are you going there with a particular brief of watching, like turning up at the road races, watching and analysing, or are you going to be there kind of almost as a fan? Like, do you get to watch races just casually?
Actually, I was at the last stage in the Tour de France, and we had these steering committee meetings on um, the Sunday, yeah, the Sunday morning, and then Monday afterwards, and then the Sunday afternoon, the CPA went to watch the final, and just those finishing circuits. And I actually just sat in the park. I just wanted some peace, actually. Look, I don't have to watch the races, and also that's not my job. And I prefer to actually watch it more on TV. I think that's probably because I really enjoy watching the race, and you don't see much when you're on the side of the race. That's more enjoying the atmosphere. And I've been maybe in the sport too long, where it's just crowds of people and that, and yeah, I much prefer watching on my phone. Um, so when I'm going to the Worlds, it's more the Worlds is more of a time where I get to can speak to all the teams, speak to the UCI, talk about the joint agreement, how to move forwards. There's a congress there, so we can. That's basically where everyone goes, and I can really sit down and talk to people. My flight is Sunday afternoon, so I actually fly before the race finishes.
Oh gosh, okay. So you're not going to see who wins.
Well, that's my job is to talk to the people and make sure everything's set. And once the race starts, I can't really do much there in that sense. I've heard some not good things about the course. It's actually meant to be not um, let's say it's probably too technical for that type of course and that type of weather. And also, I've heard there's what do you call it? It's not cobbles, but it's like these big stone rocks that are super like ice when they're wet. Um,
Okay.
Slippery. There's some sections of like granite, like polished granite, big tiles. Um, and there's a lot of this, and yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be a good race to watch on TV.
Yeah, and from the sounds of it, a good race to, if I was riding, a good race to watch on TV from that sense as well. Like, yeah, I'll just sit in the car, actually.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible to sort of pick your brains and hear about your stories as a rider and stories as a CPA president and the other side of the fence almost and a rider representative. Um, Thank you for giving me this opportunity to chat to me. Also, just yeah, it's great to see what you're doing online, and as you said, you're a very visible presence. I think that is helping because I think, as you see, and as you even alluded to, like people are sending you videos and almost doing your work for you, where they're going, this is something you need to check out. Um, so yeah, just thank you. Really, is what I want to say.
And there you go. That was an amazing chat that we had with Adam Hansen. Um, if you've made it this far, firstly, well done. You have feats of endurance or powers of endurance that I simply do not possess. Congratulations. Thank you for listening, watching. I hope you really enjoyed it. And yeah, please like, subscribe, comment, all those good things that convince YouTube we're doing a really good job. And we're hoping to get content out quite regularly. Keep a lookout for new videos as they're available. And hopefully you'll hear from us again very soon. Ta-ta.